The Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by Reaper Apparel Company. Reaper Apparel offers a casual line of superb fit, finish, and comfort. We design for those who refuse to die slowly and choose to live untamed. For those who aren't afraid to face the dark, for the ones that thrive in it, and for those who can appreciate life through a grim lens. That's Reaper Apparel Company. Go to the link in the description of this episode, use the promo code Mike Bono, and get 10% off. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by my own personal merch store, the Stupid Should Hurt merch store. I have hats, I have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, water bottles, notebooks, you name it, I've got it. The description and the link for that will be in the description of this episode. Also, right now, if you use the promo code WELCOME, I will give you 5% off of your first purchase. That's the Stupid Should Hurt merch store. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by Tactical Brotherhood, all American-made apparel, which helps support the Second Amendment. You can also find all this in the description of this episode with the link, Tactical Brotherhood. Part of every proceed does go to helping veterans, as it is a very good cause. All American-made products made right here in Minnesota. Go and check them out. Use the promo code PATRIOT15 to get 15% off your purchase. Now, let's start the show. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ride Home Rants podcast. This is, as always, your host, Mike Bono. I have a fantastic guest for us today. He is a 7-time head college coach. His overall college record was 142, 152, and 1. He's won 3 bowl games in Division I. He has an overall spring league record of 6-1 and was the Gulf Southern Coach of the Year in 1996. We're going to get into his extensive resume and everything like that. But Hal Mumme joins the show. Hal, thanks for joining, man.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me.
Hey, not a problem. So, first and foremost, for those of my listeners out there that aren't old enough like me to know your coaching career, you know, where did you come from high school into college, and you know what kind of got you started into the coaching aspect of things?
I played college football at Tarleton State in Texas, and when I graduated from there, I went down to Corpus Christi, and I worked for my father, and he had a farm equipment business. I worked for him for about 6 months. And then I had a chance to go over to Moody High School in Corpus Christi and be the quarterback and receiver coach. I did that for 3 years. And then I got a chance to be a head coach at a smaller school in the area, Aransas Pass. I did that for a year, and then I got a break, and a great gentleman named Bill Young was the head football coach at West Texas State. It's now West Texas A&M, and they're D2, but in those days they were Division I. And he hired me to be the quarterback and receiver coach at West Texas State. We went over there, and we had 2 really good years, and then we got the job at UTEP, and he promoted me to offensive coordinator. So at 29, I was like the youngest offensive coordinator in Division I. And 4 years later, we got fired, and I felt like I was the oldest. But I learned a lot along the way. The main thing I learned was we got to follow BYU through the schedule. And we always had their tapes or their film. And I started studying what LaVelle Edwards and those guys were doing out there in Provo as far as throwing the ball and stretching the field. And, you know, I had all those great quarterbacks, McMahon and Steve Young and all those guys. And I really fell in love with the way they played football. And our last year there was 1985. And I was the OC. We had a pretty decent team. We were very young. We were starting all freshmen and sophomores. And we beat them. They were the number 1 team in the nation in one poll, and they were number 3 in the other poll. And they had just come off their 1984 campaign where they were the national champions. And they came to El Paso, and we had a fantastic game and upset them. probably still one of the biggest wins UTEP's ever had. And we went through that. The rest of that season, we ended up getting fired. And the BYU coaches were kind of taken back by the fact that they fired us because they thought we were doing a pretty good job, particularly since we beat them.
Right.
And I was standing at the national convention, and a couple of their assistants walked up, and they said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to get either a head high school job or a small college job. I want to be the boss." And they said, "Well, Mike Holmgren just left our staff, and Coach Edwards, I'm sure he'd love to talk to you about coming to BYU." And they said, "We've lost some games before, but we've never lost to a team we should beat doing the things that we do." He said, because I had managed to copy him enough that we made some of those pass plays in that game work, and our defense played a fabulous game, and we managed to frustrate them and win the game. But, I'm Catholic. I smoke cigars, drink bourbon. That wasn't going to fit in too good in Provo, Utah. So I said, "Well, I really appreciate it, guys, but I think I really want to be I want to be my own boss,
Right.
I want to run my own program, whether it's in high school or college. I just want to do it myself." And they said, "Well, you're always welcome at BYU. You come anytime you want, study." And so I took them up on it, and they didn't invite a lot of people. They were pretty closed-mouthed in those days about what they were doing. And so that was really a blessing, a godsend for me to be able to go up there and study. And it got so I went twice a year for about 6 years in a row. And then after that, I went once a year. So for about 10 years, I saw every offensive game that LaVelle Edwards ever coached on film.
Wow.
And we kept going back to that same place and building on, taking what they did, putting our own spin to it, and then it worked out. And that's what people know as air raid offense nowadays. It really had its inception in their film room, and it got so ridiculous. Cheryl was Coach Edwards' secretary, and when I'd show up, she'd hand me the key the first day and say, "Look, just lock up at night." And so, because she knew I was going to sit in that film room till like 10:30 at night, watching all those cut-ups. But I took it back. We built it into what is known as air raid, and after 3 years at the high school level in Texas at Coppers Cove doing that, I got lucky again, and I got a head coaching job at little tiny Iowa Wesleyan College. They mainly hired me. They hired a high school coach from Texas because they couldn't get any high school coaches from Iowa to take the job. It was that bad. They hadn't won a game in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And had no facilities. And but a great little school. Unfortunately, they closed this past May after 181 years. But we went there, and that's where I hired Mike Leach. And Mike came on board, and he had been a BYU student and really loved that offense like I did. And so we took it and started building on it. We got very good. We're at a place that hadn't won a game in 2 years. When I went to the first meeting of all the coaches, I was everybody's favorite because they all wanted to play us for homecoming. And
sure.
Next year, they voted us out of the league because we beat all of them. And so we ended up being an independent, and we ended up having to play these big schools that were a lot bigger than us. Most of them are FCS or D2 nowadays.
Yeah.
And so the third year we were there, we had our best team back, our quarterback, all our receivers, our line, everybody. And I said, "Mike, we need an edge." And whenever we needed to do something, we would get in my 1984 Ford Taurus that the school gave me to drive around in, and we would take off and go study with somebody. We'd drive to Green Bay and see Lindy and Fonte. We'd just, whoever was throwing the ball, we wanted to know what they were doing.
Right.
And so going into the 1991 season, that last year that we were there, I told Mike, I said, "We've got to have an edge." I said, "We got the best team we've ever had at this school, but our schedule's so hard, we may only win 3 games. And he goes, well, what do you want to do? I said, let's go to Florida and recruit. I said, find somebody in Florida to recruit. So Mike, being Mike, he finds the kicker in Key West. So I go to the president. I ask for money to go to Florida to recruit, but only got enough money to fly to Orlando. So we got like 9 hours between us and the kicker, right?
Yeah.
We fly into Orlando, and as we're landing, Mike says, they have one of those spring leagues going on right now, and I know some of the coaches on their staff. You want to go to practice? I said, yeah, let's do that. So, the coach was Don Matthews, who ended up winning 7 Grey Cups in Canada. He was a great coach.
Yeah.
We went out to the Citrus Bowl, and they took us under their wing, let us sit in on all the meetings, and just really treat us like kings. And we're walking out to practice, and I looked at Coach Matthews, and I said, tell me what your best drill is. And he said, well, watch bandit drill at the end. That's where we practice our 2-minute offense. Now, I'd seen 2-minute offenses before,
right,
but I'd never seen it this well organized. I mean, he had it down. Offense was on one sideline, defense was on the other sideline. They had the punters and kickers spotting the ball, and they were, before a play was ever over, the ball was already in place. They were bouncing about 10 yards down the field on every snap, and just, substituting and executing, and defense was doing the same thing. And it was just a fantastic drill.
Right.
And I looked at Mike and I said, there's our edge. He goes, we're going to do it all the time, aren't we? And I go, yeah. It's not going to be the 2-minute offense.
It's going to be the whole offense.
Yeah, it's going to be the 60-minute offense. So we took it back to Iowa. We finished our trip. We ended up signing the kicker, by the way.
Okay.
We got him to Iowa from Key West. Pretty good player, too. And we got back and we put it in that spring. And our quarterback, who was he was a returning All-American. He'd been a starter for 3 years, or going into his 3rd year to start. And we went through the spring, and I said, Dustin, how do you like the hurry up offense? And he goes, everybody hates it. I go, why? And he goes, well, it's just too much. It's just too many decisions to make too fast. And I said, well, let me work on it this summer, and I'm going to cut it back. I'm going to make the menu shorter. And that's what I did. I said, give me 1 week when we come back in August for camp. If you don't like it, we'll junk it. Well, we came back. I cut down the plays, the number of plays. And if anybody ever saw Mike was pretty famous for, he always had that little card in his hand, that was his play sheet. Unlike the NFL guys that got 2 sheets that cover their face.
Yeah, the whole,
125 plays. Mike had his, 10 or 15 right there on that little card. Well, that's where that came from, was we cut that menu back so that we could basically memorize the plays. And we put it in, went through the week of practice, and I called Dustin Dewald in, and I said, what do you think now? I said, y'all still want to junk it? And he goes, no, everybody loves it now.
Yeah.
He said, you cut it back now, everybody knows what to do. So the first game of that season, we had to play a team that was ranked number 10 in the nation, a division above us. And Northeast Missouri, they're now called Truman State, but we had about 800 students at Iowa Wesleyan. Northeast Missouri probably had 800 students in all their English classes. So they were, thousands of students. They were about 90 miles away. And we'd gotten so good so fast, nobody would play us. The smaller liberal arts colleges that we should have been playing against wouldn't play us. So we were stuck playing all these guys. Well, Northeast called and wanted to play a game, and I said, okay, but I need a home game. Y'all got to come to me first. So we go out there and kick off, and at halftime, we're down 24-7.
Okay.
And we had one drive that was really good, and then we spent the rest of the half just kind of screwing up. We had a punt return and something else. At halftime, I'm walking into the locker room, and the quarterback comes up to me and goes, you don't have to say anything to anybody. We're going to win this game. And I was envisioning more 48-14.
Right.
I'm sure he's watching the same game I'm watching. And then I had this big left tackle named Sean Martin, who was really a sweet kid that probably never said a whole sentence to me in 3 years. He comes up, puts his arm around me, says, "Don't even worry about it, Coach. We're going to win this game." So I walked in the locker room, and it was like, Mike. It was like we were the team that was up 24-7.
Wow.
The guys were laughing and joking. They know they're going to kick their ass. And so I didn't say anything to them. We went back out there. We ended up beating them 35-31.
Wow.
And it was the beginning of a run that was really incredible. To this day, well, they closed the doors in May. 181 years of school history and about over 100 years of football history. They had only been to the national playoffs one time, and that was that season.
Wow. It's a hell of a run.
We did that, and then I got the job at Valdosta State, and we all moved down there. And then Valdosta to Kentucky, and Kentucky to Southeast Louisiana, and then so on and so forth. But that's what people really want to know about is air raid, and that's where it started.
Yeah, that. I mean, I remember being back in high school in the early 2000s, and we abandoned our run game, and we had some, hella good running backs that could have been D1 players, and we just pretty much abandoned the run, and we went to this spread them out air raid offense, which was good for me because I was a receiver, so I get a little bit more playing time, so I didn't care about that. But, it was, to know where that came from, that's really interesting to me to know that that's where that started. I didn't know where it actually started at, and that's
where it started. In those days, there was a few guys throwing the ball. There was us, there was Mouse Davis, and June Jones, John Jenkins, kind of the run and shoot guys, Yeah. And they'd been at several pro teams and a couple of colleges, and there was still BYU. They were still throwing it around, and a couple others. Dennis Erickson was doing great things at Miami, University of Miami. But the club of people that were going to throw it more than 40 times a game was really small.
Right, I'm sure.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of people that were going to do that. And Mike Leach came on board. I hired Mike because I needed to hire an O-line coach because I wanted somebody to collaborate with, and I could handle the quarterbacks and receivers, and we had a couple other assistants that helped us too, but I really needed somebody in that O-line room that could get it done. And the few O-line coaches I talked to about doing it, in 1989, if you said, "I want you to play out of a 2-point stance and we're going to have big splits and we're going to throw the ball 50 times a game," most of those guys would get up and walk out of the room before you finish the sentence.
Right.
And so I decided I just wanted to hire the smartest person I could find. And it turned out to be Mike Leach. And Mike really gets the credit for, he invented what all the offensive line play, which there's some great offensive line coaches that have had air raid backgrounds and are still in air raid offenses too. A lot of them. Bill Bedenbaugh at Oklahoma, Mason Miller at Tarleton. There's a whole bunch. Matt Moore at West Virginia. There's a ton of them out there. But Mike is the guy that put all that together and started it. And he did the drills and the terminology and the big splits,
right.
All that stuff. So he really deserves the credit for that. But that's where it started. And then we went to Valdosta State, which is in South Georgia. And in those days, Vince Dooley had been at Georgia for a long time, and I think Ray Goff had just replaced him when we went down there. But, their idea of changing the offense up was run and toss sweep to the left. So they were going to run the ball on every play. So we get to Valdosta, and we do not have a very warm reception. There's this guy from Texas that's been coaching in Iowa, and he says he's going to throw the ball 50 times. You can't do that in this league. And so the first couple of years there were pretty icy, but then we started winning all these games, and people started falling in love with what we were doing. We started drawing big crowds at the games because we were entertaining. And by our third year there in 1994, we played for the national championship, and our quarterback, Chris Hatcher, won the Harlan Hill Trophy. And he's the head coach at Samford University and is in Birmingham, does the stuff just like he did it when he was a player. They had a great run this past year. I think they were got beat in the semifinals.
They did.
In FC.
Yep.
And all the other, Dana Holgerson and of course Coach Leach and my son and Jay Norvell at Colorado State. There's just a ton of them out there doing this stuff. Neil Brown at West Virginia.
Yeah, I know Neil Brown. Yeah, I'm a huge West Virginia fan. I follow that program. Yeah. That area.
But what happened was when we got to Kentucky, it started a little bit at Valdosta. The local coaches started coming around and wanting to know what we were doing. After the last couple of years that we were there, we had huge amounts of visits from coaches, and they started wanting to know what we were doing. And then I got blessed, and Coach Newton came and hired me to take the job at the University of Kentucky.
Right.
And we inherited Tim Couch, and so it was just a perfect fit. And CM was really brilliant. He was way ahead of it. He was the first guy that wasn't a coach that believed in what we were doing,
Right. Yeah. I mean,
and was willing to take a chance,
Right.
So when we got to UK, that first year there, we beat Louisville, that hadn't happened in a while. And that was a big win. And then we beat Indiana. And then we had a really tough loss to Florida, who was playing for the national championship, won the national championship that year. But a great game. And then the next week we played Alabama, and Kentucky hadn't beat Alabama in 75 years. And our players got so much confidence from those first few games that when Alabama came to town, they knew they could beat Alabama. And we did. And once you beat Alabama, they may not like it that you beat them, but they're going to find out what you did.
Right.
So we started getting Alabama high school coaches come to Lexington for the next 4 years. They just poured into, the whole state of Alabama went air raid.
Oh, yeah.
And about that time, Leach had left and got the job at Texas Tech. And same thing happened in Lubbock with the Texas coaches. So you kind of had this groundswell from Georgia to Texas where people all of a sudden were saying, oh, this is a players like this. It's a more fun way to play. We can get athletes out. But looking back on it, when I went to Copperas Cove High School in 1986, our 4 best athletes in school didn't play football. And I sat them down, I asked them why, and they said, because it's not any fun. Well, all they were doing was having Oklahoma drill and playing wad ball up and down the field, So those guys wanted to throw and catch and make plays. And so I showed them some film of what we were going to do. And I said, Billy, that could be you. You'd be the quarterback. And you 3 guys would be the receivers. Anyway, 3 years later when I left, they were the all-district quarterback, 2 all-district receivers, and 1 all-state receiver. And it was a early test, but a successful one. That this is fun to do, and you can recruit to this.
Yeah.
And so we learned that, and pretty soon after Kentucky and Mike being at Tech, everybody just wanted to do it. About the time you came along in high school, that's why everybody started spreading it out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get that. That was awesome. You kind of brought up to a point I was going to make here. You said, when you were talking about Kentucky, what was it like coaching Tim Couch? I mean, because again, I'm old enough to remember watching him at Kentucky and then into the pros. So what was it like being able to coach Tim Couch?
Oh, he was the most fun of all the guys I've had. He's up there. I mean, maybe the most fun one because he was so dedicated. I used to go over to the athletic center during the year, like in June or July, and I would go jog, work out.
Right.
And I remember numerous times going over there, and I'd look out on the field, and there's Tim Couch with a bag of balls all by himself, working on drops or working on accuracy, throwing it at the target,
Right.
And then, as the summer went on later on, he'd get the rest of the guys out there with him, and he'd be having pass skill and stuff like that. But he was just so focused on being a great quarterback, and he really took to this offense. It was a perfect match. It really was. And he picked it up fast. I think my son Matthew was his backup quarterback, so Matthew had a lot to do with that, I think, because Matt backed up 3 All-American quarterbacks, 2 at Valdosta State and Tim Couch at Kentucky. So it's made him a pretty good football coach.
I'm sure it
But
has.
he had a lot to do, I think, with the early teaching for Tim. But Tim he had great pocket feet. He had great accuracy. He was brave he was a warrior. I'll never forget the first year we were at UK. We played a game. LSU came to town, and they had Cecil the Diesel and Rondell Mealy and Kevin Falk. They had three tailbacks that could just pound you into submission. And it was raining, and they did pound us into submission. The only reason they didn't rush for more yards is they just got tired of running. And but we were getting beat by 4 touchdowns or so, and it's the fourth quarter. Well, we kind of find our stride. We got behind early, and then we kind of found our stride with them. We started scoring. Well, we got this one drive going. This is in the fourth quarter, and one of our tackles missed, and the big defensive end comes rushing into Tim and hits him right in the jaw.
Oh.
With helmet to jaw. And I looked at it. I was standing about 10 yards from it. I saw it. I was, oh, my God. I'm an idiot. I can't believe I left him in here this long. And he came to the sideline. He had a jaw like this. I said, are you going to be okay? And he goes, I think I broke my fucking jaw. Jeez. What am I doing? I'm an idiot. So he goes over by the trainer and sits down. I go and get the backup warmed up and finish the game,
Right.
I look up. We get to the ball. Somehow or another, we managed to stop them. I think I think they just got tired of running. And we get the ball back with about 2 minutes left. And I look around. I'm standing there's Tim standing right next to me. He's ready to go in again. And he takes us the last 2 minutes, and we score a touchdown. Takes a beautiful 2-minute drive down the field. And that carried over the next year, because the next 2 years we beat them. And we had a great win down the next year. And Tim's last year with us in 98. We had a thrilling win down there in Baton Rouge.
Right.
And I think that those last couple of drives of that first game we played them, because the next year it was all the same players. I mean, they beat us by 4 touchdowns one year, and the next year we go down there and beat them at their place. So it's a growth deal, a mental thing. And I think Tim was so tough. He didn't go over there to hide on the sidelines and hide behind a bruise or an injury or whatever it was on his jaw. And he built on it. He did that. So anyway, that's some of the things I remember about him, about coaching. He was just a great competitor.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, just even watching him on TV and stuff like that. You could just tell he was one of those guys that was tough as nails and just wasn't going to put up with anything, especially at the quarterback position. You don't see that much,
Yeah, doing what we did at the time too. I mean, most people if they were throwing it 25 or 30 times a game, that was considered a lot.
Right.
Yeah, Tim was throwing it 50 times a game.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows his grit, but also, you've coached with Bob Stoops at the XFL level, for the Dallas Renegades as a coordinator. Take the XFL. I'm intrigued by the XFL and how it's coming along and everything like that. So, one, take me about Bob Stoops and just the XFL in general, because at first I was against it, but the more and more I watch it, and I'm really intrigued. So take me through a little bit of that.
Well, it's one of the reasons we're starting up this International Football Alliance, too, because I think back in the 80s, before you were born, when I was coming along as a young coach, the USFL took root, and played in the spring and the summer. And at first, fans were, I don't know if this will work. I don't know if I want to watch football that time of year. But then the USFL was so much fun to watch that it caught on. And then ever since then, of course, they famously folded because they tried to move to the fall and compete against the NFL, which that wasn't going to happen.
No.
But ever since then, football people have thought there is a niche there.
Yeah.
There is a time. There's people that just don't want to watch the NBA, and there's people that just get bored watching baseball. And there is a niche there for football. So the XFL, I thought our version of it with Vince McMahon owned it in 2020 was really coming along. We had great crowds. I mean, I know in Dallas that little stadium we were playing in holds 20. I think we were capacity most games. Seattle was drawing 30. St. Louis was drawing over 30. Houston was drawing over 25 or 30. I mean, most of the franchises were drawing. They weren't just on TV. They were selling tickets, and there was a lot of excitement with it. And then, of course, like everybody in the nation, COVID hits, ruins the whole thing.
Right.
I think the version of it now, they need to get out of this hub deal they're doing. Having everybody practice in Arlington, Texas all week long, and then get on the same airplane and fly to your game site. I don't think that's real smart. Guys like you don't have a chance to interview the players. Right. You don't have a chance to go to practice and watch. The local newspaper doesn't have any, what are they going to write about? Well, I did a Zoom meeting with somebody,
Right.
I mean, there's not that excitement that you have around a team that builds between Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then, game day getting there. You just don't have that vibe because, the Houston team is not in Houston. They're in Arlington practice, and they're not going to show up in Houston until the day before. So I really hope that they get rid of that idea. That's not a very good idea. The USFL is the same thing. They're playing in hubs. They've got 4 hubs. It's kind of like we did in the spring league. We played in 2 hubs in the spring league. They're playing in 4 now. So they got 2 teams in each hub. But, the New Orleans team's never been in New Orleans. I mean, the Pittsburgh team has never been to Pittsburgh. I mean, I just think they've logistically and marketing wise, they're missing they're missing out on a lot of fans.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're excited about our deal, because we're going to have teams in Mexico and teams in Texas. It's 2 places where people are going to show up for games, and they're going to be excited to watch us play.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that about the XFL, that they're all kind of in hubs right now. That doesn't. Yeah, that's a huge miss by anybody who knows anything. Put these teams in their cities; it'll draw a buzz around that city and around football.
And we were doing that in 2020, but then McMahon sold them, and Dwayne Johnson bought them along with Redbird Capital and Danny Garcia. It's different ownership. It's different concept now.
Right, and I get that. Everybody has their own vision they want to do, but I mean, I think after this, when they go back to the drawing board, I think that's one thing they like you said, they need to look at. And I hope somebody from the XFL hears this when it airs, and they can make that adjustment.
Well, yeah, you look at their crowds; they're not drawing anybody.
Right, because nobody knows where they're at. They're all in Arlington. I mean, you get them out into the cities.
Yeah, exactly. The players, this has been true for me at small college, high school, the SEC. People relate to people. They don't necessarily relate to organizations. And those players being there all week long, no matter what you're talking about, people want to support those players.
Absolutely.
Because they get to know them. They have friends. They have girlfriends. They have parents. They have, acquaintances. I think they've missed the boat on that part.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll get better. I hope it does. But I want to talk about you mentioned it there. Is it the IFL? Is it
IFA. Yeah.
IFA? Take me through that. What are your plans for that, and how we were looking to get that rolling?
Right now, I'm working for the league. There's going to be those players out there that want to give it a shot. We're going to have some tryout camps starting next month. We'll do that through September. Okay. We'll have several camps all over the United States and in Mexico. And we're kind of, in the CFL, they're allowed to have 16 or 17 Americans, and then the equal amount of Canadian players. Right. We're kind of mirroring that idea, but we're going to have 20 Americans and 33 internationals. Okay. And we've got some deals cut with other leagues, the European League. There's a pretty good football in Japan these days. The Japanese want to partner with us. A lot of the arena teams are partnering with us. So we're going to provide a place from training camp in May, and then play in June and July. Have a championship game in August, and we'll have good crowds. We will. We'll have a team in Cancun, Guadalajara, Chihuahua, and then there's going to be a press conference later this month, and they're going to announce the American teams. Okay. But it's an American entity, an American LLC, but we chose to try to bridge the gap with Mexico, because they've got over 100 years of playing football down there too, and they've got some real enthusiastic fans that there's 97 million people in the nation of Mexico that tune into the NFL every week. Yeah, well, and that's a lot of football fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're having it at our seasons are we kind of aligned it so it's after the soccer season's over with. The only thing we're really competing with is the Mexican pro baseball, and so we think it's got a chance to be really successful.
Well, I look forward to checking that out for sure, because that's just something that's
IFA. They can go on our website and we'll have some of these camps, these tryout camps, announced for the players that want to give it a shot. But it's pro eligible guys. Basically, what we're trying to do is provide a chance for them to get some film and move to the next level if they're good enough.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got a couple final questions for you. One real big one. We had, a guest on, Ernest Wilson. So how do you know Ernest, and where did that relationship start?
It really started through Mike Leach. Ernest became friends with Mike, and then Mike told me about him. And I got to be, he just had always been interested in what we did on offense. And I went to New Mexico State in 2005 to be the head coach, and I hired Ernest to be on my staff and be the recruiting coordinator. And we've developed a great friendship ever since. And then he was on my staff, and 2 springs ago when we won the spring league, which was the forerunner of the USFL that's playing right now. And Ernest he's a great person and a great coach, and I enjoy being around him. It's probably, if I can get him to Mexico, he's going to come with me there.
You're trying to get him to Mexico. That's awesome. Yeah, I loved talking to Ernest. It was a great time to just sit and, even though we had to do it via Zoom here like we have and everything like that, you could just feel the passion he has for the game of football. Do you know, and it's...
Well, he's got an interesting background too. He's done it at a lot of varied levels. Like, right. He's been a head arena coach. He's coached with a lot of great guys. He's coached in Division I. He's been a coordinator and a head coach in smaller colleges. So he's been just about every level there is, and so he's a handy guy to have around, because he just knows everybody and he knows what to do.
Yeah, it was great talking to him, and I needed to know that relationship that y'all had. That was just what things when we scheduled for you to be on. I was like, I got to know how him and Ernest got together and got hooked up. That was just my own curiosity coming in there. But as someone who went to a Division III college, what was it like coaching at a D3 bowl game?
Oh, those were fun. I mean, we had we made the play at McMurray. We made the playoffs. We got beat in the quarterfinals one year, and then the next year we coached in a bowl game, and we actually beat a D2 school. We beat Southern Arkansas. But those guys, they're fun. They're like these pro guys. I mean, these guys are doing it for the love of the game, and they were just immensely fun to be around, and really wanting to learn, and very much Division III and Division II turns out a lot of future football coaches, because the guys that play at that, they're not worried about how big the stadium is. They're not worried about, their NIL or anything like that. They just want to play ball, and that's, to me, that's always the fun guys to coach.
Yeah, I mean, I went to D3. I loved going to the games. It was a lot of fun, and you could tell that those guys were playing because they wanted to play football and they loved football. They didn't care who was up in the stands. Like, there was times, even at little old Bethany College where I went, I was the sports director for the radio station. I had to call the games and everything like that. Yeah. And I know I'm sitting up there and I'm looking down. I'm like, man, there's like 10 people here, and these guys are out here playing like there's 30,000 people here. It is amazing to see, like, just to be able to watch that and the passion that they still bring, even though nobody was in the stands.
No, they don't. That's not what makes them tick. That's why I think, like you're saying, you have to wear a lot of hats at that level. Right. And I think a lot of coaches and athletic administrators get trained at schools like that, because it is like a apprenticeship while you're there, because you do a lot of different things,
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember at Iowa Wesleyan, I had I had a Polynesian coach named Mike Finoga on my staff, and he coached with Ernest and I too at Mexico State. But Mike was always going to find poly guys for us to recruit. And a lot of those guys are really great players. Right. They end up at smaller schools just because they got overlooked. But Mike's job was the work study was Mike was in charge of cutting and lining the field each week. So about after Thursday's practice, Mike would get all the poly guys out there, and they'd get the lawnmowers out and the machines. The fields would get painted. And away we go. It was a little business on the side right there.
Absolutely.
I always enjoyed watching all that and getting those players involved in the workings. How do you put on a football game?
Right.
I mean, you got to have there's a lot of people that go into a football game that don't have anything to do with being on the field.
Yeah.
And so at schools like that, you get a chance to promote that. And I think it's great training for future coaches and athletic guys.
Absolutely. And one final question for you here, because we are running a little bit short on time here. And where are you coaching now? And what do you got going on now?
Well, I'm working. This past year, I've spent the whole year working on the IFA.
Okay.
And we're Noel Mazzoni and I are doing this, and there's going to be some other coaches named. We haven't worked out the assignments totally, who's going to coach who. Okay. So that's where we're at. Right now, we're just pulling the league together and getting enough names to have, a pool of players that we can draft. And so we're spending a lot of time with that, and then getting to know the owners of the various franchises. So hopefully I'll be a head coach at one of those.
All right. Well, I'll definitely be looking for it, and you're definitely going to have to let me know, because I tell every guest this, and they think I'm bullshitting them, and I'm really not. But I follow every single organization, team, college, no matter what it is. guests that come on this show. I have a lot of notifications that go off on my phone on a daily basis because I'm trying to keep up with everybody and everything.
Well, there you go. That's great,
So,
and that's good. I commend you for doing it because it's good to get the word out there. It's become a lot easier now that we have podcasts and stuff like this than it used to be.
Right.
But you're doing a great service for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, and definitely let me know where you're coaching, and because I know just with just your resume alone and everything, the work you're putting in now, you're going to be coaching one of these teams, and you need to let me know because I'm going to follow them and make sure I keep up with old Hal Mumme.
We'll get you going, Michael. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, but that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Ride Home Rants podcast. Be sure to peep all the sponsors that you heard at the beginning of the show in Tactical Brotherhood, Reaper Apparel, my own personal merch store, the Stupid Shit Hurt merch store. Also, 2 new sponsors that we did get in W energy drinks made for gamers, streamers, podcasters alike, by gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. This has actually replaced my morning coffee and Monster that I used to have in the morning. I now take one of these. It is phenomenal. Use the promo code Mike Bono and you will get 10% off of your first purchase. And also, Shank It Golf apparel for the everyday man who's not going to go out there and shoot a 6-under par, but we're going to go out there and have fun. We're going to go out there and try our best and have fun while we're golfing. That is what Shank It Golf is all about, to help you rock it on and off the course. Be sure to use the promo code Mike Bono. That'll also get you 10% off your purchase there. And as always, if you enjoyed the show, be a friend, tell a friend. If you didn't, tell them anyways. They might like it just because you didn't. That is going to do it for me, and I will see y'all next week. The Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by W Energy. Energy drinks made for gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. For gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. Go to the link in the description where you can find the best energy drinks out there. Less caffeine than a cup of coffee. Also, no jitters and no crash afterwards. Use the promo code Mike Bono and get yourself 10% off. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by my favorite sponsor of the show, and that is Shank It Golf. Golf apparel made for the everyday golfer. We might not go out and shoot a 6-under par. We're probably going to shoot a 6-over par, but this is going to give us the gear that's going to help us rock it on and off of the course. Go to the link in the bio, use the promo code Mike Bono, and get yourself 10% off there as well.